And so without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Eileen Donnelly, who is the Business and Wellbeing Lead at Works Wellbeing. And Eileen's going to talk to us about the role of a leader, how to look after the well-being of our staff, as well as our own, in order to, I suppose, optimise performance. And I won't babble any further than that, Eileen. I'll hand straight over to you. Welcome.
Wonderful, thank you so much, and it's great to be here today. So let's try that technical challenge of sharing my screen, and fingers crossed it will all work okay. So can you give me a thumbs up, Sinead? Have I got a screen? Awesome, fantastic. So yeah, no, it's great to be here with you today. If not in person, then certainly over the internet wires. And yeah, as Sinead says, it's really about what's different about your role as leaders because of the situation that we find ourselves in. So just a teeny bit of background for those who perhaps don't know the What Works Centre. We are an independent body, and we've got a vision of a future where well-being of people and communities is improving year on year, and also that inequalities around well-being are reduced. And unfortunately, what COVID has done is exaggerated inequalities in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but certainly well-being as well. So what we do at the centre is we develop and we share evidence which helps the right kind of decision making. So it's evidence-informed decision making when it comes to what works around well-being. So we share that as wide as we can. Currently we're funded by the big lottery, but we were originally, but no longer, funded by government. We were set up by Cameron's government. And in order that we are a hub of this evidence, we have a number of very, very close partnerships with academic institutions around the UK. So that in a nutshell is who we are. But I just want to first start off with, how are you doing? How are you? We're in very, very difficult times, incredibly challenging in many different ways, and for all of us, but to very varying degrees as well. And I think it's so important to check in with people and say, how are you? How are you doing? And the reason I've got Spock up there is because, let's face it, most of the time we're not honest. We're not honest about how we are, despite the fact that we do tend to have a good old whinge about the weather, and you know, as winter creeps in, we're going to have more fuel for fire there to say how dreadful the weather is. But actually, when it comes to how we truly are doing, we tend not to be as honest, and people can often hide how they feel as well. And those who are experiencing poor well-being or even some kind of mental ill health, they become quite adept at it. And so it's quite challenging to be able to offer support to someone if actually you don't realize that they're not doing that well. So really important that we keep checking in. But let's just have a look at the context that we're in. So, as you are well aware, closures of nurseries, schools, universities, and the cancellation of exams and the delay of those exams into next year as well. So that was very sudden, as were the sudden changes in terms of the macro environment in which we live. So, you know, shops shutting, the out of town units being closed, offices, you know, the vast majority of places where we would visit on a day-to-day basis suddenly closing down. So our whole day-to-day routine started to change, and we panicked at first, or many people did. So just to give you a bit of a flavour, a reminder, because it's now some months ago, in week one, shoppers were stockpiling on medicines for the family, cleaning supplies, tissues, and fresh meat substitutes and canned meat. The reason we know there was an increase in sales is because reusable shopping bags, the sale of those went up 177%. And then in week two is when we saw the personal care items, so our loo roll fiasco. That's when we started panic buying all of that as well. And a huge increase in children's medicine at that time as well, 124% increase in children's medicines. So there was a stark change in our behaviour. And the macro environment was very much affected, obviously, by Boris's announcement, but then the news kept coming. We got a daily death toll. And as you'll see from the news now, we've started to go back to a daily infection rate but also we're talking about the deaths as well again. But then we also heard that the NHS staff were overwhelmed. Are we going to get there as well? Again, the Nightingale hospital's reopening. But then the news continued. We were told that we were running out of PPE, that employers were starting to talk about long-term working from home. And then the disaster of the fact that holidays were cancelled. So that respite, that rest from this situation that we were perhaps looking forward to, the uncertainty of whether we would go on a holiday, and then the certainty that we wouldn't, as holidays were then cancelled. And then these local lockdowns, in particular for Wales, but then of course we're now seeing this whole system around tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3. So just a huge amount of uncertainty and changing of circumstances as well. And of course, this tier system is going to be reviewed on a monthly basis. Now, we're seeing that reflected massively in the statistics that the Office of National Statistics collate. And just to reflect back on what those statistics told us at first. So this is what it looked like at the very point when all those restrictions were brought in. Now, the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, will collect data on an annual basis on 4 key factors called the ONS4. So that's going to be our life satisfaction, feelings that things in our life are worthwhile, our general feelings of happiness, and then our level of anxiety. And as you can see, 2 of those factors literally just went off the scale. And then they started to come back up. So happiness, life satisfaction, and life is worthwhile started to come up, but anxiety hasn't. Anxiety has not come back to its normal, or it hasn't come down to its normal levels. And it's actually at an all-time high. It's off the scale in terms of records that we have. So we have an issue there. Long-term anxiety is going to have a significant impact on our longer term well-being as well. So just to drill down into a couple of those statistics. So high anxiety, a level which you would describe as high level, is up to just below 50% of the population. Now that's up from 21 last year, the last quarter of last year. So that gives you a comparison. That is significantly higher than normal, and it isn't coming down. Low happiness originally doubled. So it went up to just over 20%. In the same time period last year, October to December, it was actually only 8.7. So again, a considerable jump. Concern about the ability to save, plan for the future, 33% anxiety than average over this. And that inability to plan, that was the #1 factor that the ONS came up with all the time, that uncertainty of what does the future look like. In particular, it was a reduction in household finances, so 16% higher anxiety on that. And then again, I talked about these inequalities. Renters and self-employed were the most likely to be negative. So those are, I'm afraid this is quite doom and gloom, but I will come up with some positive stuff as well. So as probably many of you have experienced, we had the phenomena of home working. Now, only 30% of UK employees had ever worked from home in 2019, but that figure jumped to 60%. That is an enormous jump. And it was, of course, it was very, very sudden, very sudden. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to challenge myself with technical ability, and I'm going to launch a poll. That's what I think I'm going to do. So here we go. Let's give it a go. I want you to tell me, what has been your biggest challenge during lockdown? So Mark, if you just give me a thumbs up, is that working? Can you see a poll? Awesome. What's been your biggest challenge that has prevented you from working, maybe just getting on with normal stuff? What's felt the worst thing? And just to let you know, I can't see who has voted, but I can see how many of you have. So come on, I need you all to vote. We're only at half of you so far. This is where I find out who's nipped out and making a cup of tea or getting the sandwich that you didn't have time to get down before we started. Nearly there. Thank you very much. About 80% of you so far. Really interesting. Nearly. What I'm not allowing you to do here is tick more than one, am I? But which is the biggest challenge that you've experienced? And it really depends on your situation, of course, but I'll come on to that in a minute because we've got some interesting insight into that. Okay, there's a few of you left, but I'm assuming that you're just quickly making your cup of tea or you popped to the loo. So let me share the results on that. So actually, over half of you are saying that it's switching off. Can you see that? Is everyone seeing that? Switching off at the end of the day. And actually, there is absolutely evidence that says our day has got longer. We're interspersing it with personal responsibilities, which is great. It means that we can, have that work-life balance that you do tend to get when you work from home. But then what do you do to actually switch off? Because of course, when you leave the office or you leave school, that's when your day ends. Now, you may get your laptop out when you get home, but it's that switching off that's really, really difficult. Okay, thank you for that. What I'm going to show you is the results of some research that was done by the Institute of Work Facility Management and YouGov. And they said it was about staying focused. So this is a different sample of people, of course. But this idea of staying motivated and staying focused, and actually, I think if you are working longer days and it's about switching off, that's called work intensification. And what's going to happen is that is going to play havoc on your mental capacity and therefore your ability to stay focused. So these things really, really do overlap. So, it's no wonder that we're finding things difficult. There is evidence that says there's a real sweet spot in terms of how long you should be working from home. And of course, this particular research was done pre-COVID. No research has been done since this, but it says that the sweet spot on average is about 2 days a week from home. And I think the challenge for us at the beginning of lockdown was that there was no choice. And it was 100% work from home for many of those, for many of us. Now, this does vary, as I said, depending on where you're working. So this really has a very different impact depending on your age profile. So obviously, as you can see from here, you've got quite a stark difference in the younger age groups and the younger age profiles in terms of where are they working? Have they got a dedicated space, or are they sharing it, or actually do they not really have a workspace at all? And I don't know, maybe some of you right now have got a bit of a laptop wobble on your knees. Not conducive if you're doing that a lot. Yes, Mark, I did see your laptop wobble. But yeah, I mean, that's, how often can you look down without you getting a neck pain? Really significant. And what that does, of course, is it throws up some really significant challenges and very different challenges depending on whether you're working from a desk or whether you're working from a sofa. So just a few there from this particular piece of research. So yes, around 2/3 of us are saying that we're more productive when we're working from home. How long can we sustain that for whether we're at a desk or we're on a sofa? But the interesting thing is, the longer that we work from home, the less productive we're going to get over that extended period of time, because 1 in 5 of the remote workers are now saying they're starting to struggle with loneliness. So it doesn't matter whether you're on a sofa or you're at a desk, that feeling of isolation, that feeling of loss of connectivity with your colleagues is starting to have a negative impact. And that is especially so for those who don't have a dedicated workspace. We're also seeing, again, the inequalities. We're seeing that women in particular are the most affected, as well as those from ethnic minorities. So the pandemic really has emphasized the existing inequalities that we've got. So what might that look like? Well, it is definitely raised levels of anxiety and impact on work. So again, Office of National Statistics, this is a month on from the survey I just showed to you. Anxiety levels still high, worrying about the future still high, and the impact on work still high. So just an injection of a teeny bit of humour. Absolutely, are we just living at work now? Because that's what it feels like. The days, there's a monotony to the days. My husband and I were just chatting about that today. It's really nice and sunny here. we'd much prefer to know there was going to be an end to the day and we can head out into the sunshine. But actually, work continues, and it really is about sleeping and living at work now, isn't it? And that really does have an impact when it comes to how we're approaching our work. So here's just a little cartoon that I took off Instagram. And when we feel anxious, it does have an impact on our mental capacity. But what I want to talk about is the difference between worry, stress, and anxiety. And you may be able to discern the difference when you're talking to some of your colleagues and your team members. So worry is something that happens here. It's something that is very much in the mind. Your mind is dwelling on negative thoughts, on the uncertainty of outcomes and things that might go wrong. Tends to be repetitive and quite obsessive in nature, but it's very much the cognitive element of anxiety. So very, very simply put, worry is happening in the mind. Stress, on the other hand, is where you actually have a physiological response to an external trigger, to a stressor. So that stressor is real. It could be a work deadline, it could be an exam, it could be a medical test that you're going for, and it prompts an actual physical behavioral response. So it fires up your limbic system, and it starts to release the stress hormones, so adrenaline and cortisol. So this activates the body and the brain into what we call the fight, flight, and freeze mode. And you may see this in some of your colleagues. And chronic stress is when you stay in this mode. So the stress factor remains, or you perceive that it remains. So if stress and worry are the symptoms, then anxiety is the culmination of both. So you're experiencing it in the mind and in the body. And whilst, of course, stress, worry, anxiety is quite helpful and can drive performance, actually over a long period of time, it has a negative impact. And research is telling us that actually we are all experiencing too much worry, too much stress, and too much anxiety. So I guess, you know, the follow-on question from here is, well, what can we do then? How can we support colleagues, team members, when there is so much uncertainty, when there is so much anxiety? So this is where I turn to the research that the What Works Centre have done, and they've identified 5 key drivers of wellbeing. And quite often these are, they're not recognised because we tend to think just about mental health, or we just tend to think about health, whereas actually there's 5 key drivers. Now, health and relationships are the ones that are right up at the top. Health, absolutely right now, and relationships because of the lack of connectivity, or certainly the coming and going of how much connectivity we can have with our friends, our family, and certainly our colleagues. So if I interpret that into our current context, this is what it looks like. So in terms of health, yes, it is our mental health, and it's the access to mental health services, and what that means in terms of our change of routine. Our security, physical protection from the virus, of course, but security also refers to financial security. And I picked that one up in particular because financial security is the number one reason why people will ring an employee assistance program line. It's the number one reason now. It was the number one reason before COVID as well. So financial security is a really big negative impact on our well-being. And then environment, we've already touched on, you know, where are you working? What's your workspace look like? Are you being given flexible hours? What's the classroom layout now having to look like? What kind of stress is that having on teachers? Relationships, as I said, a very, very key one, the lack of connection we've got. And then purpose, because really our purpose is changing. And sometimes we feel disconnected from that purpose because we're not having that regular contact with our colleagues. But obviously we're talking about leaders. So what I want to do is I want to focus down on the relationship of the manager. And I've got proof that the relationship with the manager is absolutely key. So this is first off a piece of research from the Oxford Research Centre, which looks at the key drivers of job satisfaction. And you'll see that interpersonal relationships is right up there at the top. And as I say, I believe the manager role is the most important. But just to check that those who are making a cup of tea have come back, let's do another poll. What do you think is the most important, or which do you think is the most important relationship at work? So let me pop up that poll and let's see if we can get all of you voting on that. Now, I'm kind of assuming that, you know, many of you, if not all of you, are leaders in some way in your role. And therefore, these results could well be different than what I'm going to show you. And I think that's really, really important, because your need for connection is going to be different maybe than a team member who needs that connection with their line manager to know, you know, clarification on role, clarification on workload, connection and with purpose. Gosh, 91%. That means that there's not many of you, all of you are pretty much on the button and still with me. So thank you for that. Right, let me show you what you've all said. So a lot of you are saying your team colleagues, which is really interesting, because I'm going to show you some statistics that say it's actually the line manager, or certainly the leaders, senior management. So let me pop that up for you now so you can see that. So left-hand side bar chart is telling you what the driver of life satisfaction is. So you can see that job satisfaction is pretty decently high. And then the drivers of job satisfaction are interpersonal relationships up there at the top. And then which relationship? It is relationships with management. But of course, you're telling me it is different for you, and that's fair, because it's incredibly subjective. This piece of research comes from the same guy. It's Jan Denev, who works at the Oxford Research Centre. So what I want to do, because I have got leaders on the call, I assume, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus down on your role as a leader, so the relationships with the management. And another reason for doing that is that 70% of our motivation is influenced by our manager. However, 75% believe that the most stressful part of work is their boss. And interesting, there's another piece of research that says the only place that is more uncomfortable than being in the presence of your boss is being sick in bed. I genuinely hope that's not the case for you if you're a boss, but that is what the evidence is telling us. So there's a real kind of yin and yang to this, that people feel motivated by their boss, but they also feel very stressed by their boss as well. So what kind of manager, what kind of leader are you hoping to be? So there's a piece of research that Accenture published last year, which I think is fascinating, and it looks at the difference in leaders' behavior in different types of organizations. So what does a supportive organization look like, and what does a non-supportive organization look like? And the leaders act very differently. So this is what they found. So on the left-hand side, you've got your less supportive organizations. On the right-hand side, you've got your supportive organizations. So this idea of open, warm, human, a real sort of almost vulnerability really in leader behavior. That is a stark difference between 5 and 88%. Workers say that a senior person genuinely cares about their well-being. Again, big difference. Workers say there's a senior person to whom they can turn to for help with their mental health challenge. There's a senior leader who is visible in supporting those with mental health challenges. There's a senior leader they can talk to about their mental health challenge, or those of their friends or family, because having a close one who is also experiencing mental health challenges is very stressful for you as well. So it's important to be able to be honest. So significant differences there. And then lastly, workers say senior leaders warn of the dangers of overworking and stress. Now, isn't that interesting? Because even in a supportive environment, only 40% of leaders are demonstrating that they are warning that, you know, they don't want colleagues to overwork. And I think that's because quite a lot of our measurement of performance is around output. It is about, you know, how hard are you working? Or maybe it's just we're not asking the right questions. So the question I would pose of you, therefore, is quite simply, what kind of leader do you want to be? Do you want to be a leader that is creating that supportive environment? Right, we've been going for half an hour, so a 1-minute break. You haven't got time to make a cup of tea. You're going to have to wait. But if you sat down, sit up. Hang on. If you sat down, yes, stand up, stretch your legs, twist your wrists around, swing your arms around, rock backwards and forwards, and just generally, hopefully, Mark, you're turning your screen off because you're jiggling around. I hope so. Bend side to side, twist around, maybe march on the spot. And if you're really feeling energetic and you haven't had your lunch yet, maybe do a little bit of a jog. One of the things that is absolutely not good for our well-being is sat on Zoom calls all the time. It's exhausting. I'll come on to that in a sec, but it's really important. I mean, one of the things I say to managers, when you're managing remotely, maybe set meetings for 5 past the hour or 35 minutes past the hour, so that you start in a meeting 5 minutes late, so it's now not going to be a 60-minute meeting, it's going to be 55, or maybe end it slightly early, but that's more difficult to do. But give people a chance to just have a little bit more time in between those many meetings that happen online. So just a bit of a tip there, but we'll come on to more tips in a sec. Right, I think that's probably about a minute, so let's crack on. Thank you very much, Mark. Arms up, I like it. Stretch. Wonderful, well done. So what I want to do is I want to point at specific studies that the What Works Centre have done, and then through highlighting those studies, give you some tools as well that you can take back into your day-to-day work. So I'm going to start off with belonging and shared values. So I have got codes here, but I've also got the link here, QR codes, but I've also got the link as well, so you can access stuff. And I'm assuming these slides will be sent around, and of course it's being recorded, so you can check back in here. So this study was very much about resilience, because people had a sense of belonging, identity, and alignment of values. So workplace belonging is all about sharing the values of your organization. And this really determines how loyal and proud you are of your organization. And that's that real sense of identity. Now, what we've done in our studies, we looked at the resilience of organizations following the 2008 recession. And what we found is that those employees who had a very strong sense of organizational identity and belonging were more than 4 times likely to have withstood the negative impacts and the effects of the recession. And that is because of the employee well-being that was in that organization. They were also more than 4 times more likely to have maintained high levels of organizational performance. So they measured this. So really significant to think about whether you are proactively helping your colleagues feel like they belong, and checking in on, are they aware of the values that underpin your work. So I encourage you to look at that study, because on there as well you'll find some tips and more information about how you can do that. So the second study was around people management practices. So obviously I've said that interpersonal relationships are important, and the evidence is telling us that managers are, and I'm assuming that a lot of you are managers. And as you may well know from experience, and I certainly do, you don't leave a job, you leave a manager, because they're so influential in your enjoyment and your job satisfaction. So what we did in this particular survey is we looked at what difference good people management practices make. And we did this using research into NHS trusts. And we found that those who had what were deemed to be good management practices were over 3 times more likely to have lower levels of sick absence, at least 4 times more likely to have the most satisfied patients, more than twice as likely to have staff with the highest levels of job satisfaction, and over 3 times more likely to have staff with the highest levels of engagement. So some significant differences if the people management practices are good. So what I've got for you on this next slide, and again, you can download it, is a guide that we've written to how to manage remotely. Because it does involve different sets of skills, and it involves a lot more empathy and a lot more communication. So I would encourage you to download that guide. It's very difficult to know how someone is doing, because people generally hide when they're not doing okay. Even more difficult when you're not actually physically in the same space as them. So you know, that checking in and a slight adaptation and tweak on your usual management style, absolutely key to get the best out of your team. So yeah, so as I say, you know, quite often people's emotions are very much hidden from view, and so I encourage you, just, you know, don't be fooled by the behavior that you see, don't be fooled by what they tell you, because actually there might be an underlying cause to behavior that is surprising, but also there might be something underlying there that they're just not telling you about. So it's about checking in, asking them, making sure. So below that surface, what you're likely to get is thoughts and feelings that they're consciously hiding, but actually feelings that might be quite subconscious for them even. Underneath there, you've got values and beliefs, which drive behaviors, again, subconsciously. But right under there, which they've pushed down, could be underlying needs, fears, uncertainties, and even potentially threats to their identity and feelings of isolation. So this idea of encouraging people to fit in, for example, is possibly driving people to not disclose how they're really feeling. And what you really want is people to feel that they can be their authentic self, that they can tell you how they're feeling. And then if they express feelings of poor well-being, if you genuinely listen to what they say, the trust that person has in you, particularly if you then get into a situation where if it is work related, you can do something about it, and then together you can solve the problem they're presenting to you. That the level of trust that you're getting from that person then is really, really amplified. So what I want to share with you is this idea of what we call a servant leader, and this is all about really saying, what can you do to make their lives easier? Physically, cognitively, emotionally. What can you do that is going to make not their lives easier, but as a result, them being able to be more productive? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. And happy employees are definitely going to be more productive. So the fundamental elements of a servant leader are very much the same as you'd find in any kind of other sort of human relationship, but it's about mutual trust. It's about encouragement, empathy, and good communication. So these attributes, if you're able to demonstrate these, will really create a supportive environment. And that's where your employees will actually feel what we call psychologically safe. And this is almost like a new buzz term that people are using in the area of health and safety, that this isn't just physical safety, this is now really about psychological safety. And if they do feel psychologically safe, they're going to deliver their best, and they're going to be feeling their best and cognitively working at the best. And quite often this isn't major structural changes or big demonstrations. It can actually be those micro actions that really, really count. And you know, once we're in a state of stress, even when it's mild, it can cause disorientation, you know, an impairment on our cognitive ability, our perception even. And I say this because there's been a study done, and I think this is fascinating. Our peripheral vision drops from 180 degrees to 30 degrees, so that's really narrow, during times of stress. We become quite focused. So it means that if we're stressed, we may start to see things as being potentially a threat when actually they are no longer a threat, or they aren't a threat at all. So I'm encouraging you to have a look at what it means to be a servant leader. So let's just look at these in turn. So empathy, compassion, and vulnerability. The vulnerability for me is the real human bit. You know, a manager who can genuinely demonstrate that they care about an employee's well-being, that they're curious as to how they feel, you know, sincerely saying, how are you? How are you doing today? And there was a campaign called the Ask Twice campaign, because when you say to someone, how you doing? It's a bit like saying hello. Ask them again. Be really genuine about trying to find out what's happening for them at the moment. You want them to raise concerns, because if they do, you may well be able to solve them. If they don't raise them, you don't know they're there. So really sincerely trying to find out how they're doing. And again, research is showing us, and it stands to reason, if an employee perceives that their employer cares about them, and then experiences the fact that their employer cares for them, then they will work harder. There's a lot of discretionary effort when they think their employer cares and looks out for their best interest. So I really encourage you to be empathetic as far as you can. Now, gratitude. This is really the encouragement bit. Thanking colleagues, make them feel valued, celebrating small achievements, maybe asking them what's been good in the last week, what you're proud of. Then you get a sense of what they feel valued for, and then you can praise them for it. Now, I would just have a sort of word of warning on this. It needs to be genuine. We are brilliant. We have a built-in radar to be able to see fake expressions of emotion. So it has to be genuine if you're going to do it. Positivity. So yeah, being as positive as we can, without it being false. I heard someone call it realistic positivity. You know, this isn't candy floss. It's got to be real. But actually, that positivity is infectious. So it's called unconditional positive regard. And it's the practice of validating feelings without any judgment whatsoever and offering support. And it bolsters motivation and fosters positivity and authenticity. So let me tell you about a study that was done with some athletes. What they did is they compared athletes who had received unconditional positive comments from their coaches, and then they compared them to athletes who didn't, and they just received criticism. The former group experienced an increase in confidence, greater love for the sport, and a stronger persistence through challenges. And let's face it, we're in a challenge right now. The latter group were less secure, less motivated, and tended to wear out more quickly. So the same pattern has been found true for teachers and students as well. And it applies to bosses and the people that we coach in the workspace as well. So positivity is key. Now, what is very important for you personally is awareness and self-care. And I can't express this strongly enough. In order for you to be a compassionate, positive, encouraging manager, you need that self-awareness, and you need to look after yourself as well. It's this old adage of put your own oxygen mask on first. It's absolutely true. So it's about, you know, can you share your emotions with anyone? How do you let go and sort of get yourself into a position of positivity yourselves? Managers who are going to prioritize their own well-being are really going to then be able to prioritize the well-being of others secondary. So this can look very, very different for all of you, and I'll come on to some examples soon. But you know, it's about your diet, your exercise, your rest, your sleep, and you know, a lot of you are saying that it is the switching off at the end of the day. So if that's yours, focus on how do you define the end of the day. I've heard that people are going on a commute. So whilst they may not be going into the office, what they're actually doing is just walking around the block, and that is their commute, and it defines the beginning and the end of a day. So just an option. Okay, so your emotions will absolutely have a knock-on effect, and this doesn't just apply in the workplace, of course, it applies across the board in our personal lives as well. But it's this idea of, if we're not in check ourselves, if we're not in a good place, if we haven't got our oxygen mask on, the ripple effect of your interactions is clear. So it is about getting yourself in a good place. But I do recognize that, you know, we're not robots, and this is hard. But we are, you know, as leaders, you are emotionally contagious, and you are going to, if you're being negative, you will be inflicting those negative feelings on your team. So the degree to which you can manage your own stress and your own well-being, you will get better results from your team, and obviously maintaining that level of positivity and productivity in them. But here's the things, it's not easy to do, and it's not easy to do particularly in this position. And here is a couple of slides on why right now this is very difficult for you. So if you are in this particular demographic, you will see that you are the most vulnerable to both poor well-being, poor mental health, and also poor physical health as well. And I'm going to overlay this with another, unfortunately, another negative statistic. It gets positive from here on in, I promise you. This is well-being mapped across the lifespan. So inverted bell curve, really. And you'll see the dip is right sort of their middle age, which is potentially where a lot of managers and senior managers and leaders find themselves. And actually, what's quite distressing, I guess, is that there's almost nothing that has a greater impact on our well-being than work. So you'll see from the beginning of that graph that the minute we hit working age, our well-being starts to tail off. The good news is that it gets better when we retire. But you need more good news than that. So let me give you some more good news than that. There has been a global study done that says there are 5 ways to well-being. So I'm going to run through these quite quickly. So this is kind of the final bit of my presentation. Now, whilst this survey was done in 2008, they are just as relevant now today, even more so. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run through those bit by bit. So the first one, connect. Loneliness is a significant issue for us right now because of the restrictions. And it is a killer, literally. It's as dangerous as heavy smoking. So we are social beings. No matter how much we are potentially an introvert, we're hardwired to be social beings. We're hardwired to bond and depend on other human beings. It's critical for our well-being. It almost acts as a buffer, really, for times of stress and poor well-being. And that's across all age groups. So with this in mind, I encourage you, reach out to people, talk to someone rather than sending an email, and maybe make a commitment right now that you're going to put aside 5 minutes when you switch off at the end of the day, because you're going to decide that you're going to switch off at the end of the day. 5 minutes, you're going to give someone a call and you're going to reach out and chat to them for 5 minutes and find out how they're doing. And that will make you feel better, I promise it. Secondly, be active. 30 minutes of daily exercise has been shown to be more effective for treating mild to moderate depression than medication. So, you know, the nights are drawing in, it's getting cold, so this potentially is a bit harder to do. It's important to keep moving. So I'm not saying we have to become fitness buffs. I'm just saying keep moving. It's really, really important. So maybe I'm harping on about it again. Switch off at the end of your day and maybe decide that you're going to just take a walk around the block, pop down to the park, and get that exercise in. Doesn't have to be intense. Just a good sort of healthy walk will do it. Take notice. Now, this is a really interesting one because our attention span is narrowing, and it has been for some time. And with that in mind, I want to check that you're still taking notice, and I'm going to run another poll. So let me quickly just get that one up for you. I want you to tell me what you think the average attention span is. Now, when I talk about attention span, I'm talking the amount of time you can spend concentrating on one task before you get distracted. Right, let's see if you're still paying attention. We're doing well. You're still with me. Don't know about you, but my tummy's rumbling. I didn't get to have my lunch beforehand. Delayed gratification. Awesome, nearly there. Couple more. Okay, let me show you the results of that. 18 seconds. It's not much, is it? Let me tell you what it actually is. 8 seconds. 8 seconds, that's less than a goldfish. Now, this has come from a global study done in Denmark. And interestingly, the really big drop-off was around about the same time as smartphones hit the scene, probably connected, I would say. So where we're at is we've got more to concentrate on. We've got more information. A huge volume of information if you think about it. We've got this urge for newness, and that urge for newness is built into our devices. So this idea that you scroll and it refreshes. I've been told that is an absolute nonsense. The technology now, you do not need to do that to refresh your screen. But they've kept it in because it keeps you holding your device for longer. That is fact. Heard it from a guy who was ex-Apple. Now, what you're doing is you're constantly switching between different topics. So your brain isn't focusing on anything in particular. We're getting oversaturated with tweets, text, push notification, adverts, Facebook posts, emails, and it goes on and on and on and on. The brain is constantly switching. So it is difficult to pay attention. Now, let me show you what we're also doing. We're picking up our phone a lot. On average, we're on that for 3 hours and 16 minutes a day. That's a lot. Now, checking emails, I think we're probably all really guilty of this. 30 times every hour. That's every 1.5 minutes. And interestingly, every time we start a new task, our brain has to kind of reorientate itself. So really, interruptions, checking emails, are deadly to productivity. So is there something you can do to maybe turn off notifications so that you're not constantly getting those distractions? Now, the social media world it's against us on this. 500,000 people join Twitter every single day. 12 million Twitter users follow 64 or more Twitter accounts. That's a lot of notifications. 1.5 million follow 511. So there's a huge amount of distraction. People spend 700 billion minutes on Facebook every minute. Sorry, that would be ridiculous. Every month. 700 billion minutes on Facebook every month. And Facebook, get this, Facebook users install 20 million apps every day. And most of those are just downright distractions. It's affecting our productivity and it's affecting our well-being, huge amounts. I mean, every time we switch, we have to reorientate. The adrenaline starts pumping, a change in environment. So that's why when I say take notice, this is just about not necessarily mindfulness meditation. It's about trying to be present in the moment and focusing on things. So difficult given the higher levels of anxiety we're experiencing at the moment, but one that I really encourage you to have a go at. This is my favorite one. Practicing kindness can promote physiological changes in the brain. What's even better is that if you give happiness to someone else in whatever way, the impact it has on you is amplified. Why wouldn't we do it? So the positive chemicals, the serotonin and dopamine, they're called the happy hormones. The opposite of that, negative emotions such as anger and jealousy, they contribute to the production of cortisol, so the stress hormone, and that cortisol weakens our immune system and also makes us gain weight. So acts of kindness will actually make us lose weight. I don't think I can quite say that, but that's paraphrasing slightly. But it is a positive thing to do to make you feel better. And then finally, keep learning. So this is about setting goals, having a purpose, moving forward, and definitely been associated with higher levels of well-being. Now, I'm going to tag one more onto here before I finish, and this is easily my favorite subject: sleep. It's one of the most important factors when it comes to well-being, and yet, unfortunately, it's the one thing that we have probably the least control over. But lack of sleep is fundamentally associated with disruptions in mood, disruptions in thinking patterns, concentration, memory, learning, vigilance, and reaction times. And if you think about all the ways in which the human being has evolved, we have not changed the way that we sleep in terms of the length of time that we need sleep. Now, it varies across the lifespan, as you can see here. And certainly from the evidence that I have read, anyone who says that they can highly function on less than 6 hours a night, you are an absolute minority in the entire population. And the scientist who says that has said that I can round up the number of people who can highly function, not survive, highly function on less than 6 hours sleep, and I can round the number up to 0. So the one thing I have changed dramatically in the last 12 months has been my sleep. Prioritize it above everything. And I'm really sorry if you've got children. I have to. It's not always easy. I get that. Now, just absolutely finally, last slide, I just want to say that looking after yourself needs to be a priority, and you need to make it part of your routine. It needs to be a habit so that you don't consciously have to think about it. Anything that we have to consciously do every day becomes exhausting. And if you've ever signed up to a gym membership, you'll know what I'm talking about. But if you build it into your routine, you don't ask yourself, shall I clean my teeth this morning or brush my hair? You just do it. So build it into your routine, that bedtime such a time, no more than a glass of wine, whatever works for you, build it into your routine and make it become a habit. Now, apparently, habits take about 66 days before they set in. So the one thing I would say is don't think about 66 days, just think about day number 1. Start with today. What can you do to make your life more full of well-being? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to just remind folks, if you have a question, please do go ahead and ask it. There was a question, Eileen, going back to your slide on the sofa versus office. One of the participants has asked about, was the 44 to 54-year-old age group shown on that slide? I'm not sure whether it was. The slide had gone by the time I spotted the comment. So I'll let you just...
Shall I go back to that?
Absolutely.
Let me see if I can get...
Go on, that's the question you were asking, isn't it?
Let me have a look.
Good stuff. Yes, thank you.
There's my nice iceberg.
And that's the only question I've spotted in there. So if anyone has another one, do let us know.
Come on, we're getting there. There we go. Oh no, it's that one.
That one. Yeah.
And what was the question?
What about the 44 to 55s? I mean, we're feeling left out here, Eileen.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to refer you back, unfortunately. I'm going to refer you back. I wonder whether that's an error on my part, and I can't remember the source. Well, I've got the source, so I'll look it up. I mean, one of the things I would say is between 45 and 55. If you take a look at, I'm not going to keep flicking because it'll be a bit unpleasant on the eyes. If you think about well-being across the lifespan, between 45 and 55, you've got the bottom of the bell curve. So I would say in those particular situations, you've probably got, I think you can probably follow that graph to see that more people are working in an office environment at home. So they'd be a long blue line, but that's where you see the worst well-being across the lifespan. So I think probably whilst they might be working from home, they're probably not experiencing good well-being.
Yeah, sounds about right. There are some other interesting comments there in the chat. I think I'm particularly taken with Elizabeth's point about, I think, our appreciation of colleagues now in this situation has changed, and I think that's something that, you know, lots of us have noticed, that maybe relationships and the kind of contact that we've taken for granted in the past is now, hello, that's our youngest conference participant so far. Look at that, relationships exemplified right there. Very glad you could be here. That's cheered everyone up. Right, well, I'll stop waffling then, because that's far better just sitting here and waving at you. I'm going to remind everyone that there is a survey link in the chat. It's not just about us asking you how you found the sessions, though we will, but the really key point I'd love you to participate is we're asking you about what else you need, so that as we're designing and shaping what we do over the coming months, we can take your thoughts and needs and into consideration and build a program of work that's going to be what you want and what you need. So this is an opportunity for you to let us know what you think that should be. I want to thank Eileen. Thank you, Eileen, for a really interesting session. Loads to take away. I've made stacks of notes myself, so thoroughly appreciate that. The peripheral vision thing, who knew? That's just bonkers.